Hey, what's up, bud?
Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
How'd you get credentialed to come in here?
I'm credentialed press. I got my own press credentials for this press corps.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Good for you.
So.
Good for you. I thought they were trying to exclude everybody by doing that.
Little did they know I had credentials, I guess.
Right.
I think that was the point. But.
Right, what's fencing is the
I'd like to go.
Rick told me that you got some video of some EPA official saying something the other day. Is that possible? What did he tell me? He said something. He was saying something. You might have filmed it.
I know I got audio.
What was it?
It was of them saying there's no data for State Line Lake.
Good. Hi, we've all been corresponding. I'm Rachel Bassler, the Public Information Officer for the U.S. EPA. Before we get started and hear from our speakers, I just want to lay a few ground rules with everyone, just so we're all aware. So we're going to take our PPE off when we talk. None of you can take your PPE off. Keep it all on the whole time. Also, make sure to stay within these cones that we've laid out here, and our safety officers are back there. So there will be active trucks coming along this entire time to get some of the waste loaded on. But, you know, it shouldn't be too loud. If it does get a little louder, if a train goes by, you know, we'll hold for a minute so everyone can hear in the speakers. So just to be cognizant of that. And I just wanted to say the photos behind me that you see here, all of you are going to receive a press packet after this. You'll be emailed it. It'll include the photos and it'll include our regional administrators' talking points. So you'll all have those at the end too in case you missed something. Only other thing I wanted to say is just hold all questions until the end. Because there are so many of you, I'm going to call on you first. And then, you know, if we have enough time, people can ask additional questions. We'll wrap up promptly at 2:45 because they are going to start to bring these trucks in actively. They will not leave them staging anymore. They're just going to start to go, so we're going to have to get out. And you'll all be escorted back to your cars. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our regional administrator, Deborah Shore.
Thanks, Rachel, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Deborah Shore. I'm the Regional Administrator for EPA Region 5, and I'm back in East Palestine today to help highlight a major milestone in the cleanup of the train derailment. After almost 9 months of work, the excavation of contaminated soil is almost finished. EPA and our Unified Command partners have overseen Norfolk Southern's work to remove more than 165,000 tons of contaminated soil and more than 39 million gallons of liquid waste. This doesn't mean the cleanup is done or that EPA is going away, but it is another step, a huge step, in life returning to normal here in East Palestine. Moments ago, you all drove in on Taggart Street, which was reopened to the public this week, daytime and nighttime. And already we're seeing increased traffic and businesses opening their doors to customers once again, which are all great signs for the community. The area we're standing in is car scrapping area 4, where more than 8 months ago, crumpled, burned train cars were pulled from the tracks and staged here until they could be removed from the site. And this is a good location for our first ever media availability on site, because from here you can get a view of the entire site and see up close the last area where hazardous waste was excavated. To my left, if you look across the tracks over there, you can see the now clean area where the vent and burn occurred. This happened between the tracks and the area we call car scrapping area 3. And it is completely cleared of hazardous contamination and has been filled with clean soil. And filling of the remainder of the site will begin very soon. In a few minutes, Mark Durno, our response coordinator, is going to point out a couple of highlights of what you can see around you here. And we've got some posters showing what the site looked like earlier this year. When I first visited East Palestine in February, I promised that EPA wouldn't leave the community until all the work is done. We're finishing the excavation here at the derailment site, but I want to assure you that EPA isn't going anywhere. I've heard residents ask, how can we be certain that all the hazardous contamination has been removed? That's why in September, we started site-wide soil confirmation sampling. We're going to collect 2,500 samples from all across the site to double check and ensure that all the contamination is gone. And this sampling work is going to take several months. And I know folks are concerned about the creeks that run through town. Just last week, we ordered Norfolk Southern to conduct additional cleanup and investigation focused on oily sheens and sediments in Sulphur Run and Leslie Run. Building on the extensive work already conducted in the creeks, actions under this order will determine if more cleanup is necessary to ensure any potential long-term impacts are addressed. Similarly, we're going to continue monitoring the air to ensure that it's safe to breathe. We are continually evaluating our air monitoring plan and will adjust it as work on the site changes. Since the derailment, more than 100 million air monitoring and sampling data points have been collected. Since the evacuation was lifted, outdoor air monitoring and sampling results continue to indicate no concern with respect to derailment-related chemicals. As you all are aware, in the first month of the response, we opened a community welcome center to answer questions and speak one-on-one with residents. We've had more than 1,000 visitors and answered more than 1,200 phone calls, and we will continue to be available to the public through our hotline, email, and website. But in mid-November, November 13th, we're going to change Welcome Center hours to by appointment only. There's still more work to be done, and EPA is going to be here as long as it takes. In closing, I want to thank all of the responders and staff and all those who spent long hours away from their families to be here to ensure that the families of East Palestine and the surrounding community are safe. I want to give special thanks to my state and local counterparts standing with me today. Ann Vogel from Ohio EPA is here. I want to thank her for the continued presence and assistance with the cleanup of this site. All state agencies have been rigorous in their sampling, planning, oversight, and public health support. And we've been lucky to work alongside all of you. Mayor Conaway, no one anticipated the village of East Palestine would become an international spotlight overnight. The way you and your village have responded to assist in any way possible has been remarkable. Thank you. We've come a long way since February and we're not done yet. I look forward to continuing to work with you in East Palestine.
features, talk a little bit about how we establish completeness of the cleanup, and then from there I'll turn it back over to Rachel and she can take your questions. So the area behind me, as Deborah noted, is car scrapping area number 4. You can see from the really large hole in the ground that there was a significant amount of contamination. Likewise, across the tracks in car scrapping area 3, all we had to do over there was just a quick surface scrape. Both of these areas contain burned up and used rail cars. But the tricky part about this area behind me was that there were a network of underground pipelines or crops that helped guide contaminants from the ditches into these pipes into this area. In addition to that, all the sheet piling you see in this area is due to the amount of water that builds up. There's some ponds and lakes on the other side of the state line here, and it influences shallow groundwater. As a result, we have to put in all these pilings to ensure that we can keep this area dry while the excavation occurs. And as you can see from the back end of the excavation, it went down pretty deep. We were actually pulling product directly out of one of the trucks early in the response. And that probably saved a lot of additional cleanup that had to be done because we were able to actually address contaminants from a source area, get the high-haz materials out of the ground, and then get it off site prior to it contaminating more soil. I do want to show you one quick image. So the excavation behind me is also depicted in graphical form on this image. And what we do in each one of these grids is, as soon as the excavation is complete, we collect a soil sample from the bottom, a composite soil sample, and we compare the results to what we call groundwater standards. Typically in our removal program, we don't use environmental standards that stringent, but we want to ensure that groundwater is also protected for the long haul. There's going to be a requirement to do monitoring long term with this response, but getting a complete cleanup in the soil ensures that groundwater will likely be protected for the future. All the grids have been cleared in this area. This image was from 2 weeks ago. There were still about, a week ago, there were still about 20 grids that had not yet been cleared. They are now cleared. We do have a couple grids over here in the south ditch that are getting finished up. They'll get cleared, and that's when we can put a bow on this thing and call that part of it complete. A couple other quick features to point out. Right across the way from us was one of the burn pits. If you remember when the 5 vinyl chloride tanks were vented and burned, one of those locations was directly across the rail from us. The other location was right across from the Saran Pad, the blue building, on the other side of the tracks. That's where the large fire and smoke plume was present. So just to give you some context, you're literally standing at ground zero for both the vent and burn operation and also the derailment. The derailment started just on the other side of Pleasant and extended almost to the Pennsylvania line. Almost a half mile of train tracks were impacted. And you heard the numbers, over 165,000 tons of hazardous waste between what happened in the tracks, under the tracks, and what happened in these car scrapping areas and in the ditches. My last comment here is you're going to see some changes over the next several weeks and several months. One example of that are the trucks that you've seen coming in to pick up the last remaining soil that needs to be loaded out. Large trucks, waste haulers. The trucks that come in to deliver backfill to these areas, smaller trucks, not as noisy, not as large. So you'll see less truck traffic. Trucks will look a little bit different. As our work areas change, we'll reconfigure our air monitoring and sampling network. We'll keep you all updated on how those changes occur on our weekly, our bi-weekly newsletter. We put a note in there about those changes in the last newsletter. You'll see some more as we make plans to adjust. Finally, as Deborah noted, you'll see a number of our crew, Norfolk Southern's crew and EPA crews, working up and down the creeks from Negley here to East Palestine, all the way up into this area to do another assessment of the creeks. And also, eventually, you'll see some work going on in the culverts that run throughout town to again clean out the culverts from any impacted sediments that may be present there. With that, I'll turn it back over to Rachel and take questions. Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna turn it over to Stephanie for our first question, and then Ann, I don't know if you wanted to just come up, just in case we have questions for the state. Go ahead.
Okay. I know Senator Vance and Senator Brown had sent a letter to Administrator Regan requesting more robust indoor air quality testing in the village. Is that something the EPA thinks is necessary, supports, or is willing to do?
We have received the letter, and we certainly thank our elected officials for their input and appreciate their efforts to support residents in East Palestine. We had explained previously why we believe indoor air testing is not recommended, but we are going to continue to evaluate the request from the senators, and certainly will report back to the community if any new assessment work is planned. But the reason we don't feel it's called for is that ever since the evacuation order was lifted, EPA has had a highly sophisticated and redundant system of air monitoring and sampling. And with a variety of different types of equipment, including the mobile monitoring van, the Tagabus that you've seen around the community, and now several other mobile vans doing real-time air monitoring. And we do not see any ongoing pathway for sustained air emissions from outside of people's homes to convey any emissions into people's homes. And since that redundant system of air monitoring and sampling has not shown any elevated levels of chemicals of concern outside, we just don't see any pathway to be inside.
Nope, that's it.
Okay. Deanne.
Yes, so looking at all of this, it looks a lot different than it did before the train derailment. What is the long-term plan for cleaning this up, and is there a time frame for all of that?
So, that's an interesting question, because the cleanup piece of it is actually complete, with the exception of a little bit of work we're doing around that gas line over there. So the interim plan is to get everything back. This is private property, so Norfolk Southern will be working with the property owners. It's private property over there that was one of the car scrapping areas. This is private property. I believe this is Lake Oil property. So Norfolk Southern will be working, I'm sure, with the property owners to determine what the best course of restoration will be. Our job under our order was to get the hazardous waste out thoroughly and completely, and then get it backfilled to grade, and then we can work on what the long-term plans might be after that.
Just to add to that, as Mark said, the cleanup is nearly done. Then what follows is remediation based on property owners' desires, but also the village and other areas. But there are long-term monitoring plans, and that's what's called Appendix E, that's been submitted as part of the many work plans for long-term monitoring of soil, of surface water, of groundwater, of air, and there will be different types of monitoring and frequency of monitoring, but that's what we mean when we say we're not going away, that it will be a long time for us to be studying what's happening.
Yeah, my question's for Deborah. Kind of piggybacking off what she said, talking to some residents, some of whom have come back recently, just concerned with, some who've come back recently and have noted health concerns, regardless whether that pertains to the derailment or not. Would you want to ease concerns by going in, doing indoor air testing, even if you feel that it might not be required, or that the outside air monitoring wouldn't parlay into what's indoors in people's homes?
Well, first of all, we take any reports about people experiencing health conditions very seriously and recommend that any individual go see their primary care provider or the clinic in East Palestine, which is open to anyone and can do testing, do initial evaluations, and refer residents to the appropriate kind of care provider. We also know that these volatile organic compounds are frequently found in common household cleaning products. And so we will not be able to demonstrate that if we went into a home, there wasn't from paint or a common cleaning product that's already there. What we haven't seen is any pathway from the derailment, from the chemicals that were in the derailment, that could be leading into homes.
Lindsay Watson.
Mayor Conway, questions for you. 9 months post what happened, we're standing here at ground zero. You saw up close and personal what this looked like during the vent zone, all of that. How does it feel standing here today, 9 months out, looking around and seeing how much this property has changed and what's been done?
It feels good in a sense. Sad in a sense that this happened to our village in the first place. I'm very happy with the cleanup so far. They've done a very good job. I mean, we already have grass growing in one area. I was here 10 minutes after this happened. It's night and day difference between then and now. We still have a long way to go. We've got to get this back to how the owners want it. We still have a business closed down, so. We don't know if this business will ever open or that one. We still have to see. So, we want to get these businesses back open and get full employees again. It's kind of it's bittersweet, I guess we'd say, right down here. It's definitely changed a lot. This isn't how it looked before. Some might say it looks a little better than it did before. And once they get this all filled in, it should look better. But I don't know. Like I said, it's bittersweet. We just hope that this gets cleaned up. We put it back to how the landowners want it, and get our village back on track and get us back to the
Emma Henderson.
Hi, yeah. I mean, I know we're here to talk about this, but I think everyone's biggest concern right now that I've been talking to is the water. Can you talk just a little bit about what the next steps are with that, and the sheens are still visible? People are obviously concerned.
Yeah, I was going to ask, groundwater or surface water? Drinking water or surface water? Surface water is your question. Good. Yeah, no, you know what? That's a great question. And that is the reason that we issued another administrative order to Norfolk Southern under the Clean Water Act to do further investigation on sheens, to clean out the 1,200 feet worth of culverts here in the village. And as I mentioned earlier, that expanded assessment is going to go from Negley all the way back here to East Palestine. Now, there's a couple key notes that we have to recognize. Sulphur Run is what we call a limited use stream. It's basically a commercial industrial stream that's been channelized, for purposes of village life. So it's never been a clean stream, right? There's all the past historical industry that has been here has contributed to the contamination that is in that stream. However, we do see some signatures from the derailment in areas of Sulphur Run, and that was one of the reasons that we were able to establish this order and enforce it. So yes, the stream's going to get thoroughly assessed again. If there are some opportunities for cleanup, that will happen. Leslie runs a different story. It's not nearly as contaminated, other than right up around the confluence of Sulphur Run and Leslie. And it is a sensitive ecosystem, especially when you get about a mile south of the confluence of Sulphur Run. Ohio EPA, Ohio DNR, and our other ecological stakeholders do not want that. Do not want any invasive activities happening in that stream, if at all possible. And the reason is the fish community has returned to the levels that they were at back in 2022 when the state did a routine stream assessment for the Little Beaver Creek watershed. So it's really important for us to take all those issues into consideration. But again, if the contamination is to the point where some removal will be necessary, then that will be considered. But you also have to remember that we did a thorough assessment already of Leslie Run and Sulphur Run. And the levels of contaminants don't look much different than they did pre-derailment. So we're feeling pretty good about where the streams are at. We recognize that you can see a lot of sheen coming off of Sulphur Run. And that's why we're engaging in this very thorough and expanded assessment.
Damon Maloney.
When talking to some of the residents, they still talk about the emotional trauma from the train derailment, running boards, things back to normal. Mayor, how do you deal with that as this long-term recovery plan is still in play?
As far as the emotional trauma, we've partnered with the Norfolk Southern to help just funding for a couple local businesses that offer that insight right up the street. And then also with the county, they applied for a grant from the state of Ohio, and they're going to be opening a clinic very soon up in Unity. It'll actually be out of town, so people feel, people that are still traumatized to come into town, they can go up there. It's a couple miles out of town. Hopefully they feel comfortable there as they can. It's going to take a long time to deal with this. I hear everything from people who are skittish to hearing a train whistle to they don't feel comfortable sitting by the tracks when the train goes by, but it's going to take a while to heal those emotional wounds, and all the counseling everybody's offering is all going to be free, so they won't have to worry about going into debt to get counseling for an event that they haven't been. So we're doing our best to try to heal it. Thank you.
Where's Fox 8? Is Fox 8 here? Okay. Next we have Katie.
Yeah, Mayor, I just was curious your thoughts on just the refiguration of all the air monitors.
All the samples they've taken, 100 million
Data points, yeah.
data points, haven't got many, if at all, any high levels. I have urged them to keep them up by the schools, just so parents can be, know that their children are safe in the schools, and right by the school too. So it's nice to know that that our children are safe in the schools. As far as around town, I mean, if they're not getting levels, I understand why they're pulling back a little bit. It'll help, get some congestion. People four ways on around town and all hours of the night outside. So, yeah, I feel comfortable, with all the data we have that they should be.
This question for Commissioner Shore. Yesterday on News Nation, we aired a story where an EPA official said to a Pennsylvania resident some troubling statements that he believes, this is his personal opinion, that some of the illnesses here were related to exposure, and second, that the EPA should have been earlier to test in the creeks. I want to give you an opportunity to comment on that. And second, given that EPA just ordered Norfolk Southern to do more work and more investigation in the creeks, why not test inside these holes, many of which line up along these holes?
I'll partly answer your second question. I haven't seen the report, and since you're not naming an official, I'm not familiar with what you're saying. The testing of creeks is because we've seen visible sheens that may be and have a constituent of fuel, oil. We know that at least one of the tank cars did leak some fuel and that wasn't fully accounted for, so we need to test. And it could be legacy contaminants in the sediment from years ago, but that's why we're testing to try to see if it's linked to the derailment. But I don't I'll let Mark try to answer the question about testing inside homes. Again, these are volatile organic compounds. When exposed to air, they volatilize and disappear quickly. So it is just extremely unlikely that anything inside a home will result in
Could be the residents are asking, begging, test inside the home. Wouldn't it be easy for the EPA to put tests inside the homes and say, you know what, all clear?
The EPA is an agency that has as its foundational commitment to base ourselves on science and the law. And the science in this case doesn't suggest that it is wise or appropriate to do that.
I'll only add one other statement to that, Rich. The surface water samples have come back non-detect for all contaminants, for the most part, with a very low-level blip here and there. The surface water has been cleaned since March or April. I don't know the exact date yet. But the only volatilization that can potentially happen in these homes that are near sulfur run, or Leslie run, but primarily sulfur run, would come from these creeks, and they've been cleaned. The surface water has been cleaned. We know that there's contaminated sediments, but there's not any contaminants of concern in the actual surface water itself. Again, except for a blip here or there. So there's just, as Deborah said, there's no pathway to exposure. So to your first question, the official you're referring to is me. And the bottom line with the creeks, back in the spring, we reported about this. I made the same comments in public meetings back in the spring about we'd love to get to the creeks a lot sooner, and we still believe it. However, it was really important for us with these creeks to ensure that all of our stakeholders had a chance to review the plans. They had a chance to look at all the ecological considerations of the sampling plans that we were putting together. So that's why it took a lot longer than it otherwise would have to get in there and start that thorough assessment. On the second issue, same thing, it's kind of old news. We addressed the health questions at a CDC public availability session back in June. And I was essentially repeating the same thing that they said, although I was couching it was my own opinion, which it was in that particular session. So, again, we've addressed those issues with you.
All right, everyone's been able to ask one question, so I guess we'll kind of just open it up to the group if there are any others.
Yeah, I actually have a question.
Yeah.
I know, what about the blue building over there? Where, yeah, we're excavating right here, but then it just stops.
Thanks, Stephanie. That's a great question. Part of, you heard the term, Appendix E, right? Our full characterization or full assessment plan is to do a vapor intrusion study in 4 commercial facilities. Ceramic Fab, Grave Industries, Advanced Ceramics, and the Stohecker facility. We want to make sure through that vapor intrusion and soil sampling around those buildings that contaminants didn't migrate underneath those buildings. That's really important. If we do see that has happened, then there's obviously going to need to be more work that gets done. So excellent question, and that's part of the long-term assessment.
The water tank that's still sitting there, what is the long-term plan for that?
Yep. Another good question. So we call that water tank and water treatment system. The technical term for it is called contained-in determination. And the contained-in part means that we had a hazardous waste that was influencing the wastewater. That hazardous waste, hazardous component was vinyl chloride. Even though the influent going into the tanks, the water going into the 2 big blue lake tanks, is testing clean now already, we still consider it hazardous because of the way the rule is written. And until we finish that long-term assessment, until we finish Appendix E, we have to consider any water that's collected on this site as hazardous until we can prove that the soils are no longer in. So that water treatment system is going to operate for several more months until that assessment's complete. Once that assessment's complete, then that water can rest in the ground where it allows. Thank you. Good question.
If you're worried about vapor under some of these buildings, what about the houses that are here along Public?
Yeah, another great question. So part of the long-term assessment plan is we call it a step-out procedure. If we see hazardous components on these properties, and even this area that was scraped and this is all clean fill, we're still going to sample. If we see hazardous components in advancing towards properties that are away from the properties that we're sampling, and the properties that we're sampling are all the support areas around it. It's not just the known impact areas. We will then expand that assessment to other properties, and those assessment techniques include all the contaminants of concern. We've also added several other contaminants, including dioxins and furans, to that long-term assessment program to kind of close the book on the concerns with those issues.
Rich, one more question. One of the things I heard you said on this at a certain point, the EPA negotiated with Norfolk Southern to extend the boundaries of testing and sampling review. My question is, why is the EPA negotiating to start it off? Couldn't the EPA be deciding where everything was tested?
Yeah, no, and we did in our administrative order. We gave the company a unilateral administrative order, and we told them what the area of investigation was. However, as we were developing work plans and as we were gathering more data, we recognized that those boundaries may need to get expanded. So the negotiation was in the work plan process to do additional work outside of the boundaries that were identified in our administrative order. We could have given them, taken the time to create another administrative order to expand the boundaries. But it was a lot easier for us just to sit down and do it through the work planning process. It took less time, it took less legal maneuvering, it was just the easiest thing to do, and we achieved the same outcome in a shorter time.
You guys mentioned that you're not going anywhere anytime soon. For those who may be concerned watching at home, or maybe sort of nervous that things are changing, since you guys have had such a heavy presence here over the past 9 months, in just a few sentences, how can you summarize it? And maybe just those words that you're still here, you're still putting in the work, you're still, the goal is to still make sure everything's safe.
You want to do that, Deborah? Or Deanne?
Well, there are many residents who would be delighted to see our footprint shrink, and we certainly have been hearing from them. That's why it's so important then to celebrate Taggart Road being reopened for public use, and that's a great thing. Our number is always going to be there. We'll call any time. We will be here when needed, and you will see our folks around doing some of this long-term testing and sampling, and the site characterization, the collection of so many soil and water samples will continue well into next year. This is Ann Vogel from Ohio EPA.
Yeah, Katie, so, and what I would add is that even after US EPA leaves the site, Ohio EPA, as I wanted to say, we live here. We're Ohio, right? We're not going anywhere. And so I wanted to reassure residents that even our standard operating procedures have rules for testing drinking water on a regular basis. That was happening before the derailment, it will happen after the derailment. There are many layers of protection to make sure that the residents are safe. We've talked about the monitoring wells that are here at the site, ensuring that no contamination has reached groundwater. We've talked about the sentinel wells near the well field to make sure that there's no contamination approaching the well field village. We will continue testing those for decades. That is what Ohio EPA does, and we'll be here doing that work. Thank you.
Can I ask you information on the creek? What is going to be happening? Is it going to be in both creeks?
Sure. What was the question, sir?
What kind of work is going to be happening at the creeks? Is it both of them?
Yes. Yes.
Disrupt what's going on.
That's right. So, what's going to happen is going to be sampling and assessment is going to be consistent in both creeks. We're going to be doing sediment agitation in 25-foot intervals all the way up the creeks from Negley to through East Palestine. Leslie Run and Sulphur. The difference is in Sulphur Run, we're also ordering Norfolk Southern to clean out those culverts again. They did it once back in the spring or the winter. We're asking them to do it again to make sure any impacted sediments got into those culverts are managed. And if any cleanup opportunities exist, that'll be driven by the data that's collected.
Sorry, a month ago, President Biden had announced an executive order that involves someone coming down and assessing, making an assessment and reporting back to President Biden. What does that stand on something like strategy votes
Yeah, Mr. McPherson, Jim McPherson from FEMA, has been on the ground now for 3 weeks. He is meeting with various members of our team, and he's getting all the information he needs, and we're going to work together with him and put out some kind of report that he's going to report back to the White House. So that it's an ongoing thing right now. As soon as he's done, we'll probably have another press briefing and let everybody know what his findings are.
We have time for one more question.
I want to add one here.
And then Corey, you can do your follow-up.
One last thing on the FEMA report. What they're doing is called a rapid needs assessment, and so they're going to be looking at all the different aspects that might impact this community: health and medical, infrastructure, and economic impacts. And through that rapid needs assessment, then they'll make recommendations based on the input that they receive from the village, from the county, from the state, from the federal government, and from some private groups that they've reached out to. So we've talked to them many times. We've downloaded with them. We look forward to hearing what they have to report back to the president.
The last question going back to dioxin, I know there was an outlying area that you guys
Yeah, so with respect to, I'll just talk about this first. All right, with respect to, there are actually, if you read our technical memo, Corey, there are actually 6 areas, 6 locations that we had elevated levels. 4 of those areas were associated with roadways, which is common. All right, and 2 of those areas were associated with industrial properties. Actually, right across the way here in areas that have already been dealt with. So we don't look at those as areas of concern. But once we evaluate all of the assessment data that's going to be happening over the next 3 to 4 months, we will include those locations as considerations for further assessment. But there certainly isn't any need for rapid action based on those outliers. They're not at levels that we would be considered dangerous or threatening to human health, because it's essentially a roadside.
Great. All right, thank you all so much for coming. If you don't think that I have your email and you want pictures from me, come on over and I'll grab it. If not, our safety folks are out behind you. They're going to start to walk you out, and